In our previous episode, we explained that France's primary handgun, the Modele 1892, wasn't produced as much as we'd expect in World War I. In the devastation, rifle and machine gun production took priority, but handguns were becoming more important in the trenches, so France turned to their neighbor Spain. Here, in the mountainous iron-rich Basque region, a design frankly stolen from John Browning would become one of the most produced handguns in the world. Hi, I'm Othais, and this is the French Modele 1915 Ruby automatic pistol. Now, we lucked out in that our pistol here is the original Ruby. We'll get to that in a moment. Its overall length is 6.2 inches and weighs just shy of 2 pounds, really comparable to that 1892. But it has a 9-round removable magazine, and it uses a blowback semi-automatic system. It's chambered in 32 ACP. Like so many other videos, we're going to have to skip back to a previous model, and that would be John Browning's Colt 1903 Pocket Hammerless. This is a beautiful gun, and we're going to have our own episode on it, but for now, know it defines the shape of the modern handgun, and it's very much desired around the world at its release. Now, there is a region in Spain, Basque, as we said before, with a municipality called Eibar, who has had a long history of arms manufacture. What Eibar does, however, as a sort of collective group, there's individual manufacturers, there's individual designers, they're all in there. It's hard to break down who did what first because the copycats are almost immediate. But they take the 1903 and they come out with what is known as the Eibar type. Let's take a look at that Ruby photo again. With a comparison photo, we can really see the differences. The Eibar type was thickened because, frankly, the Spanish were using inferior steel. It was also simplified to aid rapid and less developed manufacture. So things like that grip safety are gone, and the finely machined safety at the rear of the 1903 has been replaced with a very coarse safety just in front of the grip on the Eibar type. Now, they both chamber 32 ACP and use that same sort of twisting barrel lockup. Now remember, this isn't part of the locking action, it's just how it goes in for assembly. Now, these Eibar types were being sold commercially, and they were designed to be pocket pistols, but one company, Gangarosa, and I'm sorry about my Spanish pronunciation, I'm sure somebody will correct me, they came out with a military version. This featured, if we take a look, a lanyard ring, and a 9-round high-capacity magazine at the time. These were marketed in the Balkans and met with, mixed success. But an important thing happens about this time, which is that France becomes embroiled in World War I. We've talked about that before, and we don't want to be heavy-handed, but the attrition, especially in terms of weapons, is very, very high, and now there's a bigger emphasis on the handgun than ever before. So France needs one, and they need a lot of it, and they need it cheap. And they need it in a secure manner, as in not having to ship it across dangerous lines or the ocean where they might get torpedoed or anything like that. Right next door is Spain. They have a land route, it's a guaranteed delivery, it's uninterrupted, it's inexpensive. I mean, it's a godsend. It's the perfect market. So when they are given this pistol to review, and it turns out that despite its appearances, it works quite well, and it chambers the, common 32 ACP cartridge, they're on it. They order from Gabilondo 10,000 a month, and within just a few months, they bump it to 30,000. Then they bump it to 50,000. The number keeps going up. Well, the original company can't keep up. Production is, I think, topped at about 20,000, I believe, if my sources are correct. So they contract out with 4 other companies to produce as many as possible so that they can feed the French orders. Well, this lasts for a short while before everybody starts making deals with the French. All the other companies it's a gold rush. Well, luckily for the Eibar region, the heads of these companies have their heads on straight. And they collude to make sure that they price fix at the French original order number. So the price doesn't change from the French perspective, but now everybody's selling. And France is buying everything that they find acceptable. Test fire a few rounds and she's ready to go. This works to refill their inventory and keep up with the demands of war, but there's a problem. These are not done by top-of-the-line workshops, and so the parts interchangeability is very low, despite the fact that it's supposed to be exactly by the diagrams. Generally, it's not a big deal because if one of these things breaks down, you just grab another one. But for the individual soldier carrying it, a really common problem could be that if your buddy's got one made by a different company and you accidentally swap mags, neither one of you are going to feed reliably. The magazine lips are fairly finicky. We found that out by filming. It took hours to adjust our old one that hadn't been shot in a while, but once we got them right, they worked. So what did the French do? Well, they went ahead and marked the gun and the magazine. So let's take it over to the other camera. And right here on the rear, we have G and U for Gabilondo e Oresti. We're very lucky this is an original Ruby. And on the base of the magazine here, at the tab, kind of hard to see with the video, I'm sure, but I think we have a photo. There we go. That means that the magazine stays with the gun, or at least within the manufacturer, although it's kind of unlikely that you're going to scramble them beyond that. Well, with the magazine issue resolved, these were adopted just fine and saw use extensively in World War I. Before we get into more detail though, let's take a look inside and see how these little guys work. We load the pistol from a 9-round detachable magazine. It seats with a heel catch. The first manual retraction and release of the slide chambers the first cartridge and resets the hammer if it had been previously dropped. The Ruby is a single-action hammer-fired system. This means a pull of the trigger only releases the hammer and does not cock it. Pulling the trigger presses on the transfer bar, which tips the sear, releasing the hammer. This strikes the firing pin, driving it into the cartridge's primer, discharging the pistol. The Ruby is a blowback pistol, meaning the only thing holding the action shut during firing is the weight of the slide plus spring pressure. This is really only suitable for lower powered cartridges as the additional spring strength and component weight make higher powers unwieldy. The safety is rudimentary and only blocks the trigger from being pulled back. It does not actually interrupt the action otherwise. There is, however, a good out-of-battery safety and trigger disconnect. This component presses down on the transfer bar, disengaging it from the sear and preventing fire unless it is in the appropriate matching notch in the slide. It also acts as a disconnect, disengaging the sear as the action cycles, allowing it to reset. This means one pull of the trigger fires only one round. There was one problem with the Ruby's design, though, that the French felt like they had to address, and we don't need an X-ray to see it. When withdrawing the pistol from a holster, the pronounced safety could drag on the inside of the leather, and go from the fire position to the safe position. This wouldn't be a welcome surprise for the shooter. So the French simply drilled a hole in the slide and fitted a rivet. This sticks out far enough to prevent the safety from dragging on the inside of the holster. Alright, the classroom part's over. Let's go out to recess with Mae. We'll load up a 9-round mag, rack the slide to chamber the first round, and the repositioned safety can now be operated easily with one hand. The Ruby does not lock open when empty. For a budget handgun, the Ruby didn't do too bad. It worked in the battlefield, and it was purchased by France and Italy during World War I. We'll also see it copied in Yugoslavia in World War II, with additional copies technically being known as the Unique in the interwar period in France. Now, Over 900,000 of these supposedly were exported. The documents are a bit of a mess. France had on inventory after World War I at least 500,000 pistols, most of which would be, again, the Ruby. That means that it really met the demands for its time. I mean, it wasn't supposed to compete directly with the Luger or C96 or 1911 or any of these other classics in terms of lethality or reliability or finish or quality or any of those things. It was meant to work and be cheap and be quick to get to the battlefield. It did those. It did those exceptionally well. And interestingly enough, because of having so many of them, the Ruby would serve all the way through World War II with the French and various powers, and then beyond that into Indochina and Algeria, before it finally was retired because other designs, which had been adopted decades before in an attempt to replace them, finally were produced in enough numbers to displace them from inventory. I mean, they're the wartime equivalent of tribbles. And that gives them their own character. So if you're a collector, they're not hard to find, and they have a lot of history, and it sort of comes down to that why not? Yeah, they're a little crude. They're not what we expect from a modern handgun. But they're a product of World War I that almost gives us a clear sense of how the conflict was. And that's worth something. But in terms of being an actual handgun, let's go ahead and get Mae in and get her impressions since she just shot the thing. Alright, we've dragged Mae behind the counter again, and this time around, just to remind everyone, we're talking about the Ruby 1915. You're a markswoman on this one. How do you feel about this, just sort of in the basics as a semi-automatic pistol?
Well, honestly, taking it out to the range, it looks a little bit rough, so I thought it might be a little hard to handle, but it was to date the simplest gun we've taken with us for me, as far as handguns go. Now, the grip is pretty long, so I'm able to get my full hand on there, but I did find it a little bit heavier than what I was expecting.
That's going to be, remember we talked about the inferior steel, so they've thickened everything up on it. As small as this thing is, almost 2 pounds unloaded. Okay, so semi-automatic handgun, everybody's going to want to know two things. How's the slide and how's the trigger?
Well, the slide's actually pretty easy. The serrations here make it nice and easy to grab, and the spring in there isn't hard to pull back on at all. And as far as the trigger goes, very little take up and clean break.
That's a rapid break, by the way. It's take up, break. Mm-hmm. So not a match grade trigger, but certainly way more crisp than you'd expect from something that looks like this.
Yep.
Okay, special features to the Ruby. Let's think for a moment. Safety. Mm-hmm. How did that do for you?
I could single-hand it, and I would love to show you on camera me using it right now, but I don't want to muzzle him, but I can easily thumb it or push it forward, one finger.
Good. Let's see. Were there any actual problems with the gun? Anything that you didn't like about it?
Well, one thing I didn't like was the magazine with the heel release on it. It's, while granted not the most comfortable one to use, this was pretty simple to use on the Ruby, so it wasn't that bad.
You're saying that it's easier to use than other heel releases?
Exactly, yes. I'm sorry for the phrasing on that.
Okay, so would you prefer it over the sort of standard thumb button we're used to today?
No, I would actually prefer the thumb button. That's just easier for me to use one-handed.
Okay, well, I guess we're down to that sort of classic question. Would you take it into battle?
I would love to say yes, but the problem comes back to the cartridge. It's still too light. I still say it doesn't have enough stopping power.
Yeah, weak cartridges are a French tradition. Anything else? Any other impressions?
One last thing I guess I want to say, the sights on here were actually very easy for me to read. While granted, some of the more modern sights today are a little taller, for its time, those sights were pretty tall, and for me, I found it easy to read. Okay, and I guess that would be about it then. Yeah.
Once again, thanks for joining us, and once again, just to remind everybody, Patreon is out there, and we do need the support. By the time this episode releases, I don't know if we'll be out of the red yet, but you can check the comments below to see if we did it, and if we did, thanks a lot, and if we didn't, I hope we're making another episode. But anyway, thanks again once more for joining us.
Thanks.